Hello, everyone, and welcome to another track guide. This week we are at Imola in the IRO4 for what I think is one of the most fun combinations on iRacing. I love lapping at Imola, I love racing at Imola, and I love the IRO4. So when you put them together, mwah, match made in heaven, bellissimo. Uh, but yeah, I just think there's a lot of overtaking opportunities here. There's a lot of opportunity to go side by side. So all around should be good racing if you find someone with equal pace who can keep it clean out there. That said, there are a lot of off tracks that you have to deal with and a lot of potential slowdowns. So you do have to be careful with track limits. Um, that said, they are actually pretty consistent around Imola. As long as you stay in contact with the red and white curbing in most places, you are going to be able to keep it on the track. So do just keep that in mind, that at least the track limits are pretty consistent around Imola. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at the lap, and then we'll talk about it corner by corner. Before we get started, let's take a look at track conditions. We have a 25 degrees Celsius track with 24 degrees Celsius air temperature and moderately low usage at 40%. If you do want to compare your lap times to my lap times, you want to be as close to these parameters for the session as possible. This week, we also do have a rules tab that explains track limits corner by corner. Imola is known for handing out a bunch of 1Xs for off tracks as well as slowdown penalties, so this is definitely worth a review. As for our laps, we had a lot of off tracks and slowdowns as we were pushing to find the limits. So finally, we had to kind of put our head down and put a nice clean lap in on the last possible lap on this fuel tank. So keep in mind, this is a low fuel run with warm tires. That said, we are talking about concepts in corners, so the lap time isn't as important as the concepts we are discussing. Those concepts don't change throughout the lap. It's really the speed that you can carry in different places does change as the fuel tank goes lower and the tires warm up. But without further ado, let's get stuck in and talk about this lap corner by corner. Turn 1 is actually the kink in the main straight we just passed, so our first real corner is turns 2 and 3, also known as the Tamburello chicane. Heading into turns 2 and 3, we have a bit of a balancing act on our hands. We're coming off of the fastest part of the circuit, so continuing to carry a lot of that speed into the turn 2 apex is beneficial, but we're also flat out from the exit here until turn 5, so a good exit is also important. On the whole, a smooth entry into turn 2 that sets us up to be back on throttle at the apex has been the most consistent way for me to find lap time here. We're hard on the brakes around the 100-meter board, and as we start to turn in and trail off the brakes, we're aiming to get pointed at the turn 2 apex in a direction and orientation that allows us to fully commit to throttle so that we don't have to lift from that point forward. If we get all of this correct, it should be easily flat out through the turn 3 apex and exit. One key to success here is making sure that we don't run deep through turn 2. As we exit turn 2 and transition to turn 3, we want to make sure that we've opened up turn 3 enough that we don't need to make corrections or lift in order to avoid running wide on exit. Another quick note here is that it's very important to avoid the black and yellow anti-cut curbs around the track that start here at turns 2 through 4. They strongly unsettle the car and can lead to a lot of bad outcomes. If we hit turns 2 and 3 well, turn 4 is easily flat out. As previously noted, we want to hit the apex but avoid the anti-cut curb that can send us into a spin. On exit, we want to use as much runoff as we can to reduce tire scrub while keeping our left tires in contact with the red and white curbing. Heading into turns 5 and 6, also known as the Villeneuve chicane, we have a similar balancing act that we did in turns 2 and 3. We're coming off of another fast section of track, and we also have a tricky exit. In this case, the straight right after the exit is short, so we'll sacrifice slightly there instead of on entry. We want to turn in using the 50-meter board as our reference with significant speed and use the entry of turn 5 and transition to turn 6 to slow the car down. When approaching this corner, the main thing to focus on is keeping the car smooth for this transition as we start to head towards the second apex. If we keep the car smooth through that transition, it's much easier to keep the car well balanced on exit and continue to use that speed that we carried in on entry. To help with this, we aim for a slightly later first apex to keep the car as far to the left as we can before we commit back to the right for the second apex. On the exit of turn 6, we want to be patient on throttle to avoid running wide, but we can use this whole runoff area as long as our right tires stay in contact with the red and white curbing. Also note that running too far wide on exit here can result in a slowdown penalty, so it's important to reiterate that smoothness is key through the Villeneuve chicane. The turn 7 hairpin is known as Tosa. Because we have a short run from the Villeneuve chicane to the entry of Tosa, and we're looking at an exit uphill onto another fast part of the circuit, we're primarily focused on a good exit. We're looking at the right side of the track for the end of the access road as our marker to brake just after. We're looking for a slightly late apex to allow for a better exit and acceleration up the hill, and we want to get as close to the apex curbing as possible without actually touching it, which can unsettle the car and limit acceleration. We want to get on throttle as smoothly and as early as possible as we focus on keeping the rear of the car planted to get the power down and using all of the runoff area on exit. Once again, as long as we keep our left tires in contact with the red and white curbing, we won't get an off track. At the top of the hill, we run into the high-speed turn 8 of Piratella. We start to brake and turn in a little bit after the 50-meter board, with our goal being to maintain as much speed as possible into the apex and committing back to the throttle when we get there to maintain that speed. The key here is once again keeping the car smooth and using all of the exit curbing we can while maintaining contact with the red and white curbing. Here that can be a little bit tricky because there is a little bit of a bump that pushes the car just a little bit further wide as you get there. Because of this, it can be very easy to run wide on exit here. So as you practice, experiment with braking and turn-in points slightly to figure out what works best for you. If you find you're running into issues with staying on track in the corner, my general advice is to take it a little bit more slowly than you want to and gradually add pace from there. Heading back down the hill towards turn 9 in Acque Minerali, we're treating this pretty similar to the Villeneuve chicane, even though both corners are turning in the same direction. We want to start turning in right around the 50-meter board, carrying a lot of speed into the first apex as we start to smoothly slow the car approaching the second apex. We want to be very focused on keeping the car balanced and in control. Otherwise, our next right turn at turn 10 while we head back up the hill is going to be very tricky. In between apexes, we want to open up as much as we can for turn 10, but it's also risky. Too far to the left, and the grass will prevent us from actually making the corner. Not enough, and we limit our acceleration speed and exit back up the hill. This is an area where you'll want to experiment, but I personally like to leave a little bit of margin for the sake of safety. Essentially, this turn 9 is all about maintaining speed and setting up for a smooth braking zone into turn 10. As we slow the car and commit to the turn 10 apex, we're once again focusing on a good exit by using all of the available curbing. We can climb right up onto the green area as long as we stay in contact with the red and white curbing with our right tires. The main goal here is once again smoothly reducing our speed from the entry of turn 9 to the apex of turn 10. That smoothness is what's going to set us up for a good exit here. Another key here is patience when committing to the apex. If you turn in too early, you're almost guaranteed an off track by running wide on exit, so be patient on turn in. As we get to the apex, we should be able to fully commit back to throttle as we head back up the hill towards Variante Alta. Heading into turns 11 and 12, known as Variante Alta, our goal here is to survive the curb strikes and get back on throttle as soon as the car settles on exit. Once again, we're looking to keep the car in contact with the red and white curbing at both apexes and on exit, and this particular exit is a tricky one because it tightens, so it makes it very awkward to stay in track limits. We're aiming to use the first apex and transition as time to continue to slow the car down and keep it stable. The more stable we are here when we hit the second apex, the earlier we can commit back to throttle because the earlier the car will settle down on exit. At around the 50 board, we can start braking, with our goal being to get good rotation into the first corner and placing our right tires on top of the taller, dark curbing. As soon as we know we're going to achieve that, the focus is going to be to do the same at the second apex, so that's where our eyes should immediately shift. Once the car lands, we'll need to be careful to keep it in control as we look to get back on throttle aggressively and keep the car within track limits. One tip I'll point out is if you do feel like you're running wide on exit a lot, one thing that helped me out is trying to turn in just a touch later for the second apex. This slightly later turn in should help orient the car a little bit better for the exit to allow us to get back on throttle a little bit easier while avoiding running wide. Turn 13 is this little kink and it's easily flat out. The only note here is keeping the car tight to the right on exit so that we're well placed for the turn 14 braking zone. These next two left-hand corners are known as the Rivazzas, and because we're heading downhill for this first Rivazza at turn 14, our job of keeping the car stable is extra tricky. If we're too heavy on the brakes as we start to turn in, the car will act like it's top heavy, and the rear of the car will want to come around if we place too much weight on the nose of the car. If we come in with too much speed, it's very easy to run wide, with the hill wanting to keep our momentum heading forward and preventing us from turning in. We can start braking right around the 75-meter mark, with our goal here to slow the car gently and smoothly while transitioning off the brakes as we head for the apex. If we arrive at the apex without any need for corrections, we can commit back to throttle aggressively as we get there, and we'll look to once again use all of the exit curbing that we can while maintaining contact with the red and white striped curbing. Note that smoothness on exit is also key here, as we're quickly transitioning to the second Rivazza, which leads on to the main straight, so any bobbles on exit will limit our ability to get a good run down the main straight. If we kept everything smooth through the first Rivazza, this second one at turn 15 should be fairly straightforward, and our goal here is to get a good exit onto the longest straight we have here. Turn 1 is also going to be the best overtaking opportunity, so a good exit out of turn 15 is extremely important to defend a position or attack a position. We want to start turning in right around the dark line in the road and then lift off the throttle just after turn in to help rotate the car by transitioning the weight forward. As the car rotates, we're looking at the apex with the goal of getting back on throttle as soon as the car is set up to hit the apex with our left tires. As soon as it is, we can get back on throttle aggressively to get a good run down the main straight and across the line. On exit, we can either use a bit of the curbing or a lot of it. In most cases, I like to mount the curbing here and use all of it, but it's very easy to go over the limit and get an off track. Placing just the right tires on the red and white curbing is also a viable strategy and reduces the risk of an off track. The main thing we want to avoid here is straddling the red and white curbing, which can cause the car to bottom out and limit our acceleration. So do experiment a little bit with which line on exit works best here for you. As we head back down the main straight, we want to hug the wall to reduce our distance traveled as we cross the line to finish our lap here at Imola. As always, I just want to give a huge shout out to anyone who's commented, liked, subscribed, come and hung out on Twitch and followed there, or chatted with me or anything like that. It is very much appreciated to get the feedback to improve these videos. You will notice actually that the hands are now moving in the replay. That was a suggestion this past week, and I think that should be really helpful just to show you the angle of my hands in the cockpit in real time a little bit better than just the telemetry item does. So again, if you leave that feedback for suggestions to improve, I am listening. Also, yeah, just the positive, reception and everything like that to all this stuff does give me the motivation to continue doing these. So I just want to say I do really appreciate you all. Anyway, I hope you have fun racing at Imola this week, and until I see you next time, good luck out there and have fun.